Hi, I'm Julie Strickland. I'm here with my friend Rick Gillis, author of a couple of books, and he's here to tell us about Your Work Does Not Speak for Itself, You Do.
Yes.
And this is such a great book, Rick, because I got through it in just 2 hours, and I was taking notes.
You know what, that's perfect, because I tell people they can read that book in an hour. It's really short, it's really brief, and writing is easy, rewriting is hard. That book should have been written in 3 or 4 weeks. It took about 7 months because I kept condensing and saying, that's fluff, I don't need that. Let's get rid of that, let's get to the point. And I think that's what you just said, so thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And now your background is very interesting. You didn't start out as a work expert, a value expert. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Grew up in the family hardware store.
Really?
Yeah, and went to college, went to the Air Force, went to college, kind of haphazardly. I didn't really have a plan. I never had a goal. I never had anything in mind. And all the time, though, even as a kid in the hardware store, the family hardware store, I was the sales guy. I was a sales kid. And everywhere I've gone since, I have been selling something. So I even sold cars to put myself through college, which is the best job I ever hated. I hated the day I started. I hated the day I left, but it was real successful. Put me through college, and so yay. As soon as I got out of college, though, I went into commercial real estate, which I did for 10 years. I managed an office park, and that was neat. I got hired on by a national company that had 26 office parks across the nation. So then my wife got school in Houston, so we came here with the intent of being 3 years here, and that was 29 years ago. So that's it. That's basically it. Well, what happened, though, is when I got here, I was looking for something different. I didn't want to stay in real estate. I actually let my real estate license lapse, and I found I was actually selling radio spots. This traffic report brought to you by?
Yes.
Yes, I was selling those for one of the big national networks, and one day a fax comes over the line announcing this thing called HoustonEmployment.com, and this is how long ago that was, because I tore the fax off of the machine. This is before it was sheet fed, and anybody doesn't know what a fax is, Google it, because even that is old tech. But this was the first iteration of faxes, and I tore it off, and I got it, and I treated it as a lead. It wasn't a lead. It was something because, okay, I need to back up a little bit more. When I was kind of shopping for a job, I thought, what do people do when they're looking for a job? They watch TV.
Yes.
So I went with a friend, and we almost created a TV show called Employment TV.
Oh, wow.
So I spent about 6 months on my own, traveling around the city of Houston, meeting people, pitching it, trying to get a sponsor. And I got that close, but it never quite closed. And so I went, heck, and then I see this thing about this HoustonEmployment.com, and I went, I know all these people now. I just spent 6 months calling on these people, and I knew they despised the local newspaper. They were looking for another option. And so we went out, and it was 3 guys in our dining room, and we were crazy successful, but I have to tell you another piece about that, because the Houston Chronicle, the local newspaper, you can't make this up. They declared the internet was a fad and they were not getting involved.
Oh, my goodness.
So I had a year and a half with no competition. I mean, I was literally the only person out there selling the internet for employment, and we just tore it up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what led to all this. Along the way, people started asking me, how do you find a job using the internet? And what happened is, because I became one of the first experts, we launched HoustonEmployment.com a year and a half before Google started. So this is really early in the internet. So people were asking me, how do you find a job using the internet? Mm-hmm. So I started telling people, and then I got called and I asked to speak at churches and ministries, and then pretty soon I was speaking all over the nation. Then I hosted a radio show, and then I hosted a TV show here in Houston all about this. And it kind of made me an expert, which is I'm not. I have no HR experience. I have no staffing experience. It's just that I learned all this by osmosis. And people, as a sales guy, you're not threatening. Now, you might be a pain, but you're not threatening. So people would share with me best practices. So I'd go in front of a crowd of 300 people, and I'd tell them, and they'd think I was like, wow, this guy really knows everything. I was a parrot. And I started writing books. And that's what brought to all this. So I'm still involved in the whole space now. Just, it was kind of like it was a divine plan. I wasn't looking for this.
And you've helped CEOs.
I've got 6 CEOs under my belt, all the way from I have worked with younger people just looking for jobs, even in college, or even I've worked with friends of mine, high school kids. But generally, it's new graduates to C-suite is who I work with. And even new graduates, I want them to get 6 months in the street before they come to me, go find their own job. Because I know, just like I was then, they know more than I do. And after about 6 months, you go, this isn't easy. And so I tell them, go out and try, because a lot of them land on their own, or the colleges help them, get somewhere.
And so I love the quotient, and I'm able to spell things out, so we'll have it spelled out above our heads.
Okay, well, all right, cool.
And I love the fact that it's simple arithmetic that can tell my value for what I have accomplished. So tell us more about the quotient.
Okay, well, this is something that, we're here in 2024, and I actually came up with this idea in about 2016. And what it was, I have to kind of tell you the way it works, the trail. If somebody comes to me and they want to work with me, I have a process, and it's not negotiable. Mm-hmm. If you want to work with me, cool, because it will be successful. I will be successful. But most people don't want to put in the time. I require clients to give me a list of their best accomplishments. You, knowing your experience and your history, I would require probably 8 to 10 accomplishments. I want you to write it. You're going to write this down for me. I don't care if it's typed or handwritten, but you're going to write it down. You're going to write out the who, what, where, when, why, and how behind every accomplishment. This is a full page. You're going to contact friends, co-workers, parents, family, anybody, and you're asking everybody you call, hey, when you and I worked together, do you remember anything special I did? Most people will say no. About 9 out of 10 calls go to 0. But one will say, well, yeah, Julie, don't you remember when we did? And you go, yes. Okay, well, wait a minute. So you call vendors, customers, co-workers, bosses, anybody in your history, and say, when you and I worked together, is there anything you remember I did special particularly? And like I said, most times it's no, but every now and then. So anyways, out of this process, you'll come up with 6, 8, 10 accomplishments that you can write the entire narrative. Now, people think I'm doing that to prepare the resume, which is absolutely true. However, more importantly, if you think about it, when you have gone through this process, I've prepped you for the interview. You could sit in front of a seat in the C-suite. You can go to a board of directors, and you are so clued in on this stuff that when somebody says, for instance, I prep boards of CEO interviews, and you've got to go into a board of directors. There'll be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people around a table, and they're all throwing questions at you, and they're trying to fluster you and see how you act under pressure. Well, if you can sit there and you're so confident about what you're talking about, and you look at somebody and say, Bill, hold that thought right there. That's a really good question. Let me finish this and get back to this. And show your control and stuff, because you don't even have to think about, let me think about an answer to that. You're ready. So that's the process. So that's a byproduct, but with that, now we can draft a resume, or in the case of an executive, we draft a professional profile, which is 6, 7, 8 pages with their whole history and all that stuff. But it all comes out of that inventory accomplishment list. And then you write the who, what, where, when, why, and how behind every accomplishment, plus any dollars made or saved. I then can look at it, and I've done so many of these, it only takes me a minute. I look at it and I go, responsible for blank that resulted in blank, which my line is, you were responsible for what you did that resulted in wow. One of my personal best accomplishments, which I share in the book, is that I was responsible for creating a commercial lease document that saved my real estate company $2.5 million. And then when somebody hears that, they go, wow. How did you do that? That's why I call it what and wow. What I did and wow. And then at that point, when they say, how did you do that? Well, guess what? Here's another little gem for your audience. People are not aware that when they go into an interview, there's a clock in the wall. And you can't see that clock, whether it's on somebody's computer, whether it's on the wall behind you. But they've allotted, the lower the level, the position, 10-minute interview, 15-minute interview. An executive might get 45 minutes to an hour, depending on. But there's a clock somewhere in the room that person's watching. And all they want to do is go, okay, I'm done. Get out of here, whatever. This process destroys the clock. By then, those 3 other people that are waiting to interview out in the lobby, they may not make it until an hour and a half or 2 hours down the road, because they're going to say, when somebody says, tell me more, you've got carte blanche to talk about who, what, where, when, why, and how, not just what and wow. I know there's all these W's, but which is why you saw in the book, I use W, and H plus $, because that's my mantra. That's my process. There it is. Ba-da-bunch. See ya. We're all done.
So, Rick, Tell me about your previous book, Leveling the Playing Field.
Leveling the Playing Field was written to help people, achieve fair pay. I'm very big on fair pay, proper pay for the best performance, which is not the way companies kind of look at it. And honestly, the quotient really got developed in that book.
Okay.
The quotient being the model that I use to measure people's performance. And, we talked about it here, but I don't know if we got it in the first segment or not, but the quotient is nothing more than the value of your contributions on the job divided by your base pay. And I have to tell you something about that. It was fascinating because when I was writing that book, I was interviewing a chief financial officer, and I was so fortunate because I called a friend of mine and I said, do you know any chief financial officers that I can get on the phone that I can talk with and interview a little bit? And he said, yeah, this guy just retired 3 weeks ago. And I was like, oh, nirvana, because I talked to him 5, 6, 7 times over the next couple of weeks. But he had just retired from one of the big medical groups here in Houston, really prominent, had 48 companies under his umbrella. So it was really neat. He really knew his stuff. But I was telling him what I was doing, how I was working with clients and with the quotient. And he said, Rick, this is groundbreaking. And I said, why would you say that? And he said, because there is no way in the accounting processes to measure the value of somebody who earns a paycheck. And I was like, I was gobsmacked. I'm just like, whoa, wait, this is important. And he said, yeah, there's never been. So you're taking the value of somebody's work and their contributions and dividing it by your base pay. That's never been done before. And I was like, yes, yeah, that's cool. So I'm just sharing that out, But this book, like I've told you before, it came out, and about 2 months later, COVID came out, and it completely COVID took over the news cycle, and I had a PR firm pushing this thing out. And yes, I did get a live presentation at the Fort Worth Library, and there were about 7 people showed up, and I got an AM radio spot with a guy in Michigan that thought he was Rush Limbaugh, that wanted to wipe the floor up with me, that he didn't think women needed fair pay.
Oh, no.
I'm not joking, and it was comical, because I he didn't have a chance. Plus, I did radio for 3 years, so. And it was comical because at the end we ended up connecting on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, and then about 3 months later I deleted him.
Oh.
I didn't want him on my list.
No, you didn't want to be associated with him.
No.
Because what you've told me before is that everyone's been discriminated against. Everyone except for a small segment of the population.
Generally, and unless you're famous, a superstar, a musician, a sports hero, there's discrimination, and it's hard. Young people get discriminated, older people discriminated. It's that right in the middle. There's a white male period that has an amount of authority. But it's interesting because I've worked with so many of those people who, after their authority has waned, or they didn't knock it out of the park as it was anticipated, they've come to me wanting me to work with them, and their accomplishments aren't as strong, or they haven't got as much, they don't have any background story. It was kind of like they were living the dream, but they weren't, and everybody I've ever seen who's gotten serious promotions, let me take that back, for the most part, everyone I've seen hits a ceiling somewhere along the way. And it's really rare that person who goes up, it is very rare that anybody makes CEO and holds it for any length of time. It's really very unique, and it's very interesting. There's not that many people that retire at the very top by their own choosing. It's a board of directors that pushes them out for whatever reason. But there's a lot of mechanics to job support, job search, job advancement. There's a lot of moving parts, and one of those moving parts, unquestionably, is luck of the draw, who you're working with. If you're a team leader, because building teams is hard, managing people is hard. Keeping everybody on the same track and with the same goal in mind is virtually impossible. All those different things.
Yes, and one piece of advice that you gave me that I really took to heart was to write down daily accomplishments, because we're not going to remember everything at the end of the year when performance reviews roll around, so we need to be writing them down.
Okay, first of all, fundamentally, yes, that's absolutely true. I recommend that people take, and at the end of every day, just take 2 or 3 minutes. Don't take 20 minutes, don't take 25 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. You're already frazzled, you're ready to get out of here, you're ready to get home, whatever. Take 2 or 3 minutes and write in that 6 p.m. plus slot, or whatever slot you're not filling with your calendar stuff. Just make a few notes. Hit this today, accomplish this, got this thing started, and leave it. And then every few weeks, go back and read these things, or every time you hit some little marker, put it down And after a while, you can go back and look over 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, and you can start seeing these things tracking, because you're not going to remember all this stuff. And really, the best accomplishments, the worst time to remember them is the day after your performance review.
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, the quotient, big picture, is to get away from performance reviews. The quotient. This is volunteer. There's nobody's forced to do the quotient in the company.
Right.
That's a really important component to this thing. But the quotient is fundamentally your performance review. You're writing it. You're tracking your own accomplishments. So at the end of the year, you can just gather all this stuff together and you can knock out your performance review, your performance report. The other thing is that by doing this and tracking it, you have a historical. When your boss tries to take credit for something you did, and you can show, no, wait a minute, back in June, I wrote it down when I first came up with this idea, and I tracked it, and here's what I did, and here's all I told, and this only takes 2 or 3 minutes to write this stuff down.
Right, and I love that it takes the subjectivity out of those performance reviews. This is quantitative. I've got dollar amounts. This is what I did. This is how much it's worth. Here's a dollar sign. You can't argue with facts and figures.
Right. Especially when you say you saved X, you improved X, you were able to sell X. I have in the book, I talk about how, and this is a big deal. And interestingly, I just did I did a presentation this week, and for the first time I presented this publicly. But I want people who earn a paycheck to be eligible for a commission. I want to be able to commission people who earn a paycheck because, for instance, I told you the story about my saving the company $2.5 million.
Tracking accomplishments has really helped me because I'm not going to remember at the end of the year what I did on a daily basis.
And that's where I'm going with that, is that I want to create an accomplishments inventory, and each one of those accomplishments at the end of the year, you want to add up those separate values, and then you divide that by your base pay to come up with a quotient. Bless you.
Thank you.
And so you add up these. See, people do a lot of things, good things, even entry level, even people without degrees. I mean, people working in the warehouse and stuff do good things. Unquestionably, people will come up with an idea that all of a sudden they go, wow, Michael had this idea to do this, and we just saved all this money in the warehouse. Whatever, that stuff counts. So anyway, tracking all that stuff, and when you add up all these different wins over the course of the year and divide that by your base pay, that's the quotient. That is the quotient.
Yes, and one of the things that I've recorded since we had that conversation was a $27,000 savings that I found by simply asking a question.
Right, so your time invested was
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. And you saved $27,000?
Yes.
Not bad, $9,000 a minute.
Yes.
Not bad. I'll take the bonus for that. Just look, I just want $900.
Right.
Yeah, I'll take $2,700 for 3 minutes.
Yes, and what I mean by that is the supplier had presented a cost estimate to perform design of a sensor. And I looked at that and I scratched my head and I said, well, you already charged me for some of that design. I know because it's on this piece of paper over here where I got prepaid. Exactly.
Right.
So I said, can you double check that $181,000 for the design and make sure that I'm not paying you twice? And sure enough, that program manager went back and came back and deducted that prior work. And that's the $27,000.
People do this kind of stuff all the time. But nobody tracks it. It's just part of your daily. It's part of doing your job. It's what you're supposed to be doing. It's all that. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. That's great. But you need to track it because your performance review, your job description, that's one of the things that I tell people with the quotient process, you have to have a really good job description. But the fact is, job descriptions have gotten outrageously expansive now. They're huge. They cover every aspect there is. So anything beyond that, because that's what you're expected to do for your X salary, whatever you're earning, or your hourly rate of pay. But anything beyond that is what you need to track and value, and then add all that stuff up. Because one of the things in the quotient is you have to make a quotient equals 1. You have to make it equal 1 every year, which means you're earning your keep. So let's just, using square numbers, let's say you're earning $30,000 a year. You deliver $30,000 in value. That's doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And that's okay. And that could be like an inventory clerk or somebody like that. If you're moving up and you're creative and you're managing and all that kind of stuff, you may be required to deliver like 3 or 5 or 10 times your base pay. So, but nevertheless, when you add all these things up and divide that, add up all those things you've done above and beyond, that's the thing about the quotient. And I need to make that clear, because in the book, I call that over and above, which you're responsible for doing, which your job description calls for. Anything you do over and above, you should be tracking. And the fact is, people do over and above every day. I do believe that.
Yes, and I love the PVC, the personal value calculation.
Yes.
Because $27,000 by itself, that's not really that impressive. But when you add it up over the 10 or 12 times that I've done similar things.
And that could have been 10 or 12 times in one day if you're really paying attention to it. It's the nature of the business nature of who you're working with, what you're doing. And if you were dealing with 4 or 5 or 6 vendors over the course of a week or two, you could have done that 3 or several times. So it's not a matter of just because you have that one, and when you get one, you should be thinking about 2 or 3 more. Don't get one and get satisfied. Always be thinking about what's ahead, what's in front of you.
Absolutely. So I'd encourage everyone, you can reach out to Rick via his website or his other website or his email, and he's available for questions and for coaching of small groups or even one-on-one. I've enjoyed his advice over the years, and I hope you will too. Any last words?
Quotient PVC, quotient personal value calculation, and quotient, it's spelled QTNT. I trademarked that. I just took the vowels out of the word quotient.
Yeah, you did.
That's it, and I like it. I think it looks cool.
Oh, one thing that we have to tell everyone is how it's self-funded.
That's a biggie, and thank you for bringing that up. The fact is, the quotient only pays for accomplishments that are over and above what your job description calls for, and because that is the case, this is money that is saved or revenue that is created that was not anticipated or planned. So the quotient is effectively self-funding, and that is a big deal, and thank you for that. I just did a presentation this week to 400 people, and that was the punchline, and I can't believe I forgot it. Thank you, buddy. Thank you very much.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Like I said, 2 hours, and I was taking notes. So very quick read, and so worth it, so self-funding. Appreciate you being here. This is the first in the series, Humans of Houston. So
Humans of Houston, woohoo!
Thank you for being the first.
Bye.